Has anyone ever experienced a phenomenon where you learn about something or you come across a piece of information and suddenly, within the next few days, you come across it again? For example, you learn a new word and the next day you hear it on the news or you read it in a book. Well, this scenario is referred to as the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, or frequency illusion. And this has happened to me with patterns, and that is what I'm going to share with you today. When I first gained an interest in patterns, I began to pay attention to how patterns were used, where patterns were used, who benefited from patterns. I even paid attention to the unconscious patterns in the cadences of how people talk. For example, I'm sure you all recognize the familiar pattern of, "Hi, how are you?" "Fine, how are you?" So what is a pattern? A pattern is used for imitation, and it teaches us about repetition. It's repetition that we use to keep ourselves organized, to maintain basic health and hygiene, to get enough sleep each day, and most importantly, to learn. Well, as we know, our brains thrive on learning and gaining knowledge. Our brains are also extremely responsive to pattern recognition. It's patterns that we use. Our brains are also extremely responsive to pattern recognition. So when we have these experiences of frequency illusion or repetition of knowledge, our brains flag this information because it recognizes the beginning of a sequence. So the more we pay attention, the more our brains are stimulated and a pattern of behavior is created. We learn imitation and repetition at an early age, and we learn this information through family traditions and religions and behaviors, and we begin to develop automatic thoughts and behaviors. So I have this funny story. My husband and I have this ongoing argument about folding t-shirts. So after silent snickering and years of folding and refolding, he said to me, "Why do you fold your t-shirts this way?" "Well, I thought you fold each sleeve into a trifold and then you fold the shirt in half." Well, he disagreed. No. You fold the entire shirt in half and then in half again. Well, don't worry, we compromised. And now he folds his t-shirts the right way. But this brings up a good question. Why do we fold our t-shirts the way we do? And why do we insist on continuing to do so? We fold our t-shirts the way we do because that is how our parents fold t-shirts. And my hunch is that is how their parents taught them how to fold t-shirts. So by definition, a pattern is something that will repeat itself over and over again. So what if somebody wanted to change a pattern? Why would somebody want to change a pattern? Well, what if the pattern were secrecy or jealousy or anxiety, judgment? What if the pattern were substance abuse or addiction? Or what if the pattern were child abuse? And what if a child who was abused knew nothing more than pain and fear, and they too grew up to be an abuser? If we interchange the term pattern with the term cycle, we could then begin to recognize these automatic cycles that tend to repeat generation after generation. What better way to test this idea of generational patterns than to explore my own family and examine my own truths? I created a genogram which visually displayed through colors and symbols, relationships and patterns that exist within my own family. And what I found was shocking, but not entirely surprising. I found 2 generations consisting of 9 women who had suffered from domestic violence, 3 persistent generations of substance abuse, and a direct line of 5 generations from mother to daughter of emotional disconnect and lack of attachment. So briefly, I thought, Am I destined to be an abuser? Is it a matter of time before I become an alcoholic? And what scares me the most is thinking, am I going to pass these potential patterns on to my children? So I had to know, is it possible to change a pattern? Well, I think yes, and I like to think of myself as a pattern changer. I continued the research I started on myself with several other women, and I interviewed women who had experienced physical and sexual abuse. And I wanted to know, did physical and sexual abuse exist within their ancestry, and were their abusers also abused? I created genograms with my participants, and similar to my findings, they were able to see patterns in their families as well. They did find patterns of physical and sexual abuse across multiple generations, and they also found patterns of substance abuse, early age pregnancies, mental illnesses, eating disorders, even patterns down to specific disconnected relationships and emotional cutoffs. However, not all of my findings were negative. I found common themes that enabled these women to break cycles and change generational patterns. The most prominent factor was awareness. All of the women made some kind of reference to feeling different. And almost down to the exact articulation I heard, I always knew I was different from my family. The second factor towards becoming a pattern changer is willingness. And once awareness was made, all of the women made some kind of effort towards making that change a reality. And these efforts include artistic expression, professional therapy and counseling, and even making really difficult decisions like leaving their families entirely. These women experienced years of challenging exploration of their life's experiences, and they grew from their challenges through self-care and compassion and honest self-reflection. And they did this through dedication and willpower. All of the women today participate in support groups or do public speaking to advocate on behalf of themselves, but essentially to promote willingness and courage in other women. The third factor towards becoming a pattern changer is acceptance. And it appeared relatively easy for the women to talk about themselves and disclose their struggles with physical and sexual abuse. Yet when asked to create a genogram and explore the truths of their families, the women began to clam up. They felt guilty and embarrassed, and they seemed extremely sad about their family's secrets and their family's behaviors. In the moments I shared with them, I witnessed these women go through a process, or a cycle, if you will, from feeling confident and self-assured to exploring their genograms and feeling this sense of shame and confusion, to then feeling a sense of comfort, honest and genuine comfort. And it was acceptance that was instrumental in this process. And by having a better understanding of their families, enabled these women to have a better understanding of themselves. Although it was not a requirement for my research, all of the women happened to be mothers. And it became very interesting to me how these women were changing patterns with their children by instilling in them early healthy attachments and affection, and by teaching their children about safety and self-esteem. I then restructured my question. If pattern changing is possible, who is the pattern changer? Is it the mother who makes an active decision to make changes in her environment and her parenting style? Or is it the child who develops an automatic response to a new learned behavior? I want to leave you with this question. Consider the patterns that exist within your own family, and pay attention to the ones you may have already changed, or the ones you may want to, and question, are you a pattern changer? Thank you.